G'day folks, AoS Coach here and welcome back to the channel. I am very excited to be having this discussion. Wrong time, by the way. I have COVID, so if I go on mute or start coughing and try to quickly mute myself, you know why. But I'm very excited because this is a chat that I've wanted to do for a long time. One, my guest is an absolute legend, and I've wanted to talk to Tom for a long time. Tom Mawdsley, the captain of the English team from the Worlds, who won the Worlds tournament, but also you've been a champion player for such a long time. A list innovator. We were literally just talking about a couple of years ago, I was watching Tom. I think it might have been Bad Dice, or I can't remember what tournament it was. Maybe it was
Blood and Glory. Yeah.
Blood and Glory. I'm watching him teleport cities of Sigma, blowing people off the board. But Tom is an absolute champion, nice guy, captain, good player. But more importantly, we're not talking about just individuals. The topic of today is going to be about the Worlds, but also how do you build a champion team? And Tom, I don't know if you've noticed this, and I'll get your introduction in a second, but the team's format is becoming more and more popular. Rewind 4 or 5 years ago, it was very much not a big kind of talking point. Now there are so many teams tournaments that are popping up, and it's so different.
Yeah, I think
that's our topic.
Yeah, so team tournaments have exploded. England's always had a few, right? So there's always been a few team events. I can't remember where the first one came from, to be honest. It was back in sort of 6th, maybe 7th edition Old World, but. So we've had a few go through the years, but now internationally and with Worlds and ETC previous, things have gone absolutely crazy for Team Warhammer, and it is, and it's not a meme. It is the best way to play.
It's a really good format. I got to experience it a few years ago. We have a teams format called the Runax run by Gabe, which is a great event. But it's popping up, right? I think it's Brotherhood. Is it Chris Tomlin runs? I think it's Brotherhood.
Yeah.
America is running.
Brotherhood's one of the best events on the calendar, and it was a real shame I couldn't be there this year because team events in the UK generally have been 4 or 8 players. So you've had the 4-player events, which generally become mates clubs, or you'll get some gaming clubs, like I've always done them with local clubs. Then you've got the 8-player events, which have been largely 6 nations, like the international side of things. But Chris filled that gap with the 6-player, which has meant sometimes when you've had a club where you've got 4 players that would normally go, the other 2 find it hard. Whereas with a 6-player event, you get everyone involved, and it's super, super good. Shout out to Chris for that one.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool ways of doing it, right? Like I remember Runax in the previous. I've seen events in the past. I remember doing my very first teams format where they made us do 1 team for every Grand Alliance, which was cracking.
Yeah, there's so many ways to innovate on the format. With singles Warhammer, you've got the GHB as a framework, but the team format is a framework above. So you've got so many things that you can do. Like a lot of places run no duplicate war scrolls, and some do no duplicate core battalions or maximum 2, no duplicate grand strategies, allegiances, and all that sort of thing that just adds that extra thought. I'm big on writing lists, and team events really, really hone in on that. You're not only writing a list for yourself, you've got to make sure that each person conforms within the pack as well, and the different ways that a pack can be written. There's talk of doing odd number teams at the moment, which I think is an interesting one, where you don't necessarily need to record a player's score. You have an odd, hopefully you have a clear winner on game results. So one team will win 3, one team will win 2, and that team wins the round, which is really interesting. And then the pairings would have to be done differently because it's an odd number.
Let's take a step back here, Tom. By the way, I'm seeing people like Agnes jump in from the
Agnes,
Council, and I think Ryan here from Team Malta and Ziggy, and there's a lot of great people joining. And it kind of just shows that the team format is becoming even Artis Opus coming in. Like, look at this. Yeah, your milkshake brings all the boys to the yard and the girls. Look at that. But let's rewind for a second, because for most people, they probably don't know about what a team's format is. Does that mean 4 people rock up on the table at the same time, or we all have 500 points? Is it like a doubles where it's like 2 versus 2? I clearly know the answer, but for anyone who maybe doesn't know the format and seen it, can you explain a bit about what teams is as a concept?
Yeah, so the first part is obviously forming the team. Every event, every player will do that differently. On the table itself, you rock up, you've got your number of people on a team versus the same number on the opposite team, hopefully. And there's a bit of a pre-game phase. So you're not playing all together. That would be a little bit chaotic, I think. You're playing individual games, but with predetermined opponents. And the way that you determine those opponents is through a pre-game phase known as pairings, where, again, each pack is slightly different, but involves some form of sort of one-upsmanship and using generally cards to determine who plays who.
Yeah, so the format itself is not specifically just one. It's still 1v1, but the way it's structured, and each of them are different. Like we rattled a little bit, right? There's Runax, there's Worlds, there's Brotherhood, there's Six Nations, there's the American Team Championship, just to name a few. And they all run it a little bit differently, but ultimately it's 1v1, but it's a team playing, and the way that you play the game, the way that you are matched up. It's not just, top versus 1v2 and 2v3. It's very much a whole different structure.
It's the beauty of it. You're playing 1v1 Warhammer, but with a greater goal. You've got the camaraderie of being there with people who are either you're friends with or you think are good, and and they can carry you to victory. Hopefully both. So yeah, it's that. It just adds that extra level of excitement to a game of Warhammer.
It's also the camaraderie. I appreciate the fact that I have a team, and whether it's win, lose, or draw, we come together, we discuss, we brainstorm, we strategize, and there's very much a community feel, and it's still match play, but I don't know, I always feel like I always feel a little bit different. Like when you're at a singles event, it's cutthroat if you're trying to win the event. But with this is a lot of collaboration, and it's a lot of community involved too.
The best thing about it, and Darren's in the chat, so he'll know what I'm saying, is after a singles event and you go to talk to your friends, you're like, oh, how did your game go? But in real terms, you don't care. What you want to do is tell them how your game went. But actually, so when you're playing a teams tournament, you've got 4 people and they all care about it. So you talk about it and everyone's invested because that result matters to those other 3 people. So, the chats that you get after the game is fantastic as well.
Yeah, it's such a great format, and I'm really happy to see it growing. And I imagine more countries are going to run it. And like I said, like I've got Runax. I've heard maybe Australia might run a second one. Whether you go to a Worlds or not is irrelevant. The teams format is just something special, and I highly recommend.
I think for those big countries as well, we're super spoilt in the UK. We're on a pinhead compared to a lot of countries. But with a team event, you've got you're traveling with 4 people. So actually it makes those long distance tournaments probably a little bit easier to swallow as well. You're not traveling on your own potentially to play a singles event. And then if you don't do well, you're traveling back for X number of hours. You've got traveling buddies built in as part of the team, which just makes it so much better.
It does bring you together. I find when I go to a Teams format, you are talking more as a group. So you'll have like a WhatsApp or a Discord. You'll have some type of group chat where you'll be list teching and brainstorming and giving people feedback. Not that you don't do that in a singles event, but I think Teams brings you together a little bit closer. You probably group carpool or travel together to the event. A lot of socializing at the event, and it's overall just a great experience. And I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat.
Everyone learns more, I think, as well, because it just naturally brings out more conversation. You're learning from other people's games because you're invested in them. Especially like for me as a non-player for some of the events, and I'll probably touch on this a little bit later on. I get to walk around and watch 8 games of Warhammer at Worlds, and the amount of info that I can absorb from that is really helpful.
So you have mentioned Worlds, and I do want to acknowledge Worlds because, again, champion team, you were the captain, captain and coach, or just captain?
Not non-playing captain / coach. So I was the non-player. So I did the the running around, the gathering beers, waters, doing the shop runs, and then did the pairings and the other things as well.
So what on earth made you get involved in the teams format? I think first off, if you're going to travel, especially as a non-player, what got you to apply for Team England? What got you to play, to coach? And I guess in this discussion, I want to break down a little bit, get in your mind, how do you create that team? You know, what's the list going to be involved? How do you do the pairings and the matchups? I want to get deep into it, but before we get into that, what got you into to teams, and why would somebody apply or want to play teams?
I mean, we're all in this, just to answer that last question, we're all in this hobby to talk to people and make friends, right? You know, you're in Australia, I'm in England. We have never spoken without Warhammer. And I think Worlds and international team events just brings that, you know, it's scheduled, right? You all go there, you all talk to each other, and you walk away with friendships that you know, I still speak to people from 2013, the first ever international team event that I did. You know, so those sort of friendships just last forever. So why I got involved. So I've been playing Warhammer for 17, 18 years, or something, competitively for that long, you know, since I was 15, 16. I applied for Team England for 7th edition, I think it was, or maybe even 6th. I didn't get on the team, got some feedback. Went away, acted on the feedback, won the Masters that year afterwards, and then made the team for 2013. And that, to me, that process was really cool. And it sort of really got me involved basically forever at that point. So I've been involved in sort of the English International Warhammer since then. Skipped a few years just because, you know, you can't travel internationally to do Warhammer every single year, although you'd love to. I finished up the old ETC days as when they were playing the 9th Age. I played for England 1 year, having never played the game before, but again, we were struggling for members, so went out and played, but also did the non-playing thing twice as well. And at that point, I was like, actually, I could get behind this. You know, the non-playing side of things was really interesting. You get all of the experience of the Worlds thing without the games not getting in the way, obviously, but you know, you can manage and still have a good time. You're not just traveling to walk around a hall. You know, you're still talking to people and things like that. So it was ETC in Croatia, in Zagreb, there was the first Age of Sigmar ETC as a side event, and it was 4 teams. So it was France, Hungary, and I can't remember the other 2. France won. It was a 4-player event, and they wanted to grow in 2018 in Serbia, in Novi Sad. So I took on the captain role. I just put my name forward. I set out a mission statement. I said, this is what I want to do. And it wasn't about me going to the ETC. It was about setting the scene and growing the team as a whole throughout the years. And to do that, I made sure that I was not a player, because I didn't want to go and say, I'm going to the ETC and I'm also one of the 6, because it was a 6-man event. Then it's not fair on the community. What I wanted to do is just make sure that we take the best team we can and then put the building blocks in place after that. And that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. And by the way, for anyone who isn't familiar, the Worlds is probably one of the few tournaments that has this captain coach role. And I think Ryan was also calling it busboy. And you look at, I think it was the French that had like the little trolley cart of drinks and snacks, and that's something else. Shout out
the French
to the
team
French.
were they take this really seriously. Not that we didn't, but the prep that they did was another level. You know, and this is all not rumors, but again, people telling me and things. They all stayed in an Airbnb, so they were all together. They debriefed after every round. They had a chef with them, like a nutritionist almost. Yeah. So these little they gave them to all their opponents as well. Little bags or cartons of charcuterie, nuts, like really healthy food. We're sat there drinking beers and eating meat, basically. Pizza. So they had their little cart that came round and made sure the players. And to be fair to them, they always offered their opponents things as well. So they were fully prepared for that. You know, they all had little sacks of little things that they gave out to us, which had some dice, some meat, I didn't know what was in mine, so I took it back to the room and left it in the room. I did not know that there was meat in there.
No, that's fair, especially for anyone who's got dietary requirements. I guess where I was going with that before you doubled down on how awesome that was that the captain coach role is something that's unique to the Worlds. It's something that if you went to Brotherhood or Runax or American Team Championships, it's something that you probably wouldn't need. But when it comes to Worlds, and I guess especially with an 8-person tournament, it becomes really big. But I guess one of the things is that you can make it as big or as little as you want, right? I've seen people dress up. Like I remember watching one team dress up as the Ninja Turtles. It was a 4-person tournament and they dressed up as one of the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Some of them really get into themes. Some of them practice. You get a house. Sorry, go on, Tom.
For a Brotherhood in, I can't remember the year now. COVID has thrown this right out. But it was myself, the 4 Facehammer guys, and Tony Moore, who lost to Marvel, RIP. We spent the Friday, we'd done a little bit of prep for pairings, and then we thought, actually, we don't have any club shirts. So we went out to the local supermarket, bought some plain white shirts and some permanent markers, and just drew our own club shirts. And we were up until like 2 a.m. And we spent more time on the shirts than we did on the prep for the event. And it showed. We came 5th. So...
it can be as awesome as you want this to be, or look, it can be a whole bunch of just friends coming together and playing Warhammer and building a community. It can be as competitive, and you could get like a house to practice, like in Worlds. And I know America, for example, like a couple of weeks prior, literally spent a week in a house practicing, trialing, using lists, just trying to understand the meta. And I
think that's where we're spoiled as in the UK. You know, we see each other at least once a month generally at events. Now, we're not always sat there practicing together, but there's always opportunities to talk. You know, whereas guys like the people in the US, they're from different states. So, you know, I'll butcher it if I try and think where people are from, but they're obviously not close. Like to give you an example, we played the Warhammer World Team event. It was like 3 or 4 weeks before Worlds or a week before list submission. I was on a team, I was captaining a team of people who weren't going to Worlds, but using the event as practice for pairings, just to try out some different things. But me and Jack both finished our games super quickly one round when we were playing their team. So me and Jack played another game to test something out for Worlds. So it affords us, being close together and seeing each other affords us that opportunity to talk and practice a lot more than potentially other teams, which helps.
Yeah. I'm actually going to show a photo for anyone, again, who might not be familiar with the format. So here's just an example for anyone who's watching, just what it looks like. It is a whole bunch of tables. Lovely. This is Worlds, by the way. Lots of teams. I love the esports kind of shirts, and everyone's in their national colors. And something that was really nice as well at the Worlds is people seem to trade their jersey to their opponents, or some type of, there was very,
I walked away with 8 different shirts, some new countries. I keep them, so I've had them from 2012. So I've got a box of shirts from various countries over the years. I don't generally wear them because I'm not too fussed about swapping with somebody that I fit their shirt. It's more of just a memento. Yeah, it's super cool.
So let's talk about the actual formation of the team. I think people who are listening to this are either excited to play, maybe they've already played, and they're thinking, how do I get better? How do I understand the meta? How do I build a team? And look, in situations outside of Worlds, it's pretty hard to say, hey, Tom, you're in my team. I need you to play Gits, and I want you to play this. And, let's be realistic for a second. But when I am a captain, or if I'm going to build a team to attend Brotherhood, ATC, some type of teams tournament, what are you considering, and how are you thinking about the team structure in general? Do you have any tips and hints? Do you just find the best players that I can? Do you find the best list that you can? What goes through your mind?
So if we're talking specifically sort of local or national team events, not international, I think.
Yeah, let's just talk generally. Let's talk generally, not specifically.
I think it's a different level when you start looking at Worlds. So locally for us, we've got clubs, we've got friend groups, and often you will pick a team from within those groups. Now you're looking at yeah, you're looking at good players. Obviously, you need people that can win games on the table. If you've got a choice between somebody who's more practiced with a better army, you'll sometimes take them. But also, I think the key thing is making sure the team gets on. You're spending a weekend together. Some people might make a mistake, and you don't want somebody who's then gonna jump down their throat about it or mock them, or although we do, as I think it's hard not to rib on somebody if they make a mistake sometimes. But it's about sort of being able to pull together as a team and say, look, you didn't do well this round, but we all did, so it doesn't matter. The end result is the team result. We don't care about individual results to a point. We need to make sure people are performing, but some people will have a role some rounds. To use Richie as an example against Denmark, so we gave Richie the Techless match with his Fire Slayers, which was terrible. But we spoke to him before the game and said, play it this way and get us 3 points. And actually he got 4, I think, maybe even 6, which is huge. That's something that he might walk away then thinking, oh, I've lost the game. But as a team, we made sure he knew he was going to lose the game, and we didn't expect him to win, but we gave him a target and he achieved it, and that was fine. That was just as good as winning a game for us. And that's something that we always highlighted as a team. But in terms of selection, yeah, something within a country, you'd probably end up going with friends, because that's kind of who you naturally play with, gravitate to, talk to. There used to be with some of the rankings, used to get points for team events, which is a controversial subject in the UK. So sometimes you would end up with super teams. So you'd have people from all over the place, and they'd forge their own little narrative to how they were friends. They'd make a gaming club up, they'd make some shirts and things. But in reality, we all knew that they were there to win and get those rankings points. But then, yeah, for Worlds is another level, because you're picking the best people from those different satellite groups in a lot of cases. So yeah.
Yeah. And, like, again, depends on how serious you are, right? Like, I know when the last Runax, I was just going to pick a whole bunch of my moderators that were in my Discord. There was going to be another trip event that I ran that it was just a bunch of mates, and they were all, people that I traveled with, I played with for a long time. And also the other consideration is a lot of teams, tournaments won't let you double up on faction or war scrolls.
Yeah.
So it was also kind of finding people that had a diverse set of armies that could play different styles. Because if I'm the Gargant player, for example, then I'm denying somebody else playing Gargants in the team. So I need to find maybe someone who plays Skaven, or someone who plays Sylvaneth, someone who can kind of come together. And that the pairings and the matchups and thinking about the meta, and there's so much consideration. And I guess for a teams event as well, not Worlds, because Worlds, again, you try to build the most meta or optimal and practice, but I have no authority. Like, I can't tell someone to come into my team and I need them to go buy models. I need them to go paint and play with certain armies. We're all just having fun.
I think the good thing about the team format is you'll generally have a pool of armies. So, if somebody owns Gargants and that's what they play, they'll probably know another faction. And then you just have that conversation between you, like, okay, so we've got 2 people that want to take Gargants. God forbid why anyone wants to, but there we go. Flip a coin. I don't mind. Somebody choose. I am, even on Worlds, I've never been a dictator of what armies people want to play. I'll veto if there's some idiotic comments, but I'll never say you are playing this, you are playing that. Apart from Darren with Seraphon. Sorry, Darren. So that side of things, yeah, you often find yourself lending armies to other people. So just to make sure that everyone's playing something different and it all conforms within the pack.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's funny you mentioned Darren, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I was listening to Darren, he's got a new podcast. Is it Miscast? I think it is. And I was listening to the episode, and they were talking a little bit about this red, orange, or the traffic light system, right? And I think Darren was talking about a lot of his matchups were being matched up as red. So we'll talk a bit more in a minute, like how you do the pairings in the matchup. But sometimes when you play in teams, your goal isn't to win every game, because in most tournaments, there's a cap. out of a 4-person tournament, it might be capped at 3 wins. But
Yeah.
your goal might be just to deny your opponent or reduce the scoring potential of the team, and maybe deny them battle tactics and grand strategies, as opposed to all 4 of us or all 6 of us must win every game. That's not the incentive structure.
Yeah, 100%. And that depends on the pack as well. There's Byron looks at Bone Splitter's army. That you made your own bed with that one, buddy, I'm afraid. So yeah, the each pack will dictate how those bad matchups will play. Like the Warhammer World pack is all about grand strategies and battle tactics. So we learn after round 1 that actually if somebody's matched into a bad game in that one, you can effectively ignore the objectives because they don't matter. The major win is the major win. It doesn't matter how many you win or lose by. The differential points came in battle tactics and grand strategies. So you would, if you were in a bad matchup, you would ignore the objectives and just try and deny a couple of tactics to maybe walk away with 2 or 3 points. But yeah, you're right with the cap, which is another beautiful thing about team events, is no one can ever run away with it, because that cap does it puts that ceiling on the teams, because you may get team A matched into team Z, whoever that may be, and if they walk away with 160 points, all of a sudden that is super hard to catch up with. So having a cap there, which at Worlds was 120, so it was six big wins, 6 20s. So often you'd end up, if you were capping, you'd often end up with 5 wins and then some minor losses and things like that. The cap was quite hard to achieve in some rounds. The players will play into matchups that they don't think they can win, but that's fine. That's why the pairings exist. Somebody takes the bullet every round. What I try and do is make sure it's not the same person every time. Because as much as we win and lose as a team, psychologically winning and losing as an individual is important. I don't want anybody to go 0-3 or in a day or something like that, because although it doesn't matter to the grand picture of it all, that person isn't going to feel good.
No, and nobody's joined your team, so 3 of you can get like optimal matchups and win all their games, and there's this one person just feeding to the wolves, giving them the worst matchups, losing. I'm
not a huge fan of the under the bus term in a general sense, because I think it eliminates responsibility of a player on the team. Under the bus, I'm not expected to get anything. Like, no, there's always an expectation there. And nobody joins a team to be that person every round. Sometimes it may be like going back years and years. I played Chaos Dwarves at ETC 2012 in Serbia, and I was that person. I was there. You've got the threat of a Doom and Darkness Hell Cannon, which can just ruin your opponent's day. But if it doesn't work, you might lose 12-8. And actually, so I got 2 big wins and 4 small losses, and that's exactly what we needed. But I think that person needs to know going into it. If there is that person on the team, they need to be almost held on a pedestal. They need to be the one that's congratulated for getting 8 points rather than somebody getting 20, because it just needs to make sure they're in the right mindset.
I might bring up this slide. This is something that I shared This is something that I shared in the Aussie discussion, and this is a pairing system. So not necessarily what people do.
Can I touch on Ryan's point? He's just made that there's no unwinnable game. Sorry. I think there is an unwinnable game. The problem being is if you're in a game that is quote unquote unwinnable, often trying to win it is worse than trying to lose it small. And knowing that going in, and that's sort of the pre-game knowledge of knowing that you're in a game that, you might have a 2% chance to win, but if you go for it, you end up with no points. Or you could take a 60% chance of walking away with 2. Often the team's going to be happier with 2 if they've told you beforehand. That's knowing the matchups. That's not, I think there are games that you can't win. They're few and far between, but often it's about minimizing the loss rather than trying to win. Sorry.
No, you're right. Like, it's the definition of success. It might be a very hard matchup. You might have like the ultimate counter, right? Your army is full of rend and all you do is rend, and you're up against I don't know, Nighthaunt, and they are a hard counter to your army, hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it can be an absolutely tough matchup, and the expectation on me might not be to win it. But to your point, my goal is maybe look, winning is a bonus, but I want to score all 5 of my battle tactics if I can. I want to score my grand strategy if I can. And if I can deny my opponent 1 or 2 of their battle tactics, that as a team would be a win. Yeah. Because the incentives are capped. So that can be an important consideration when you're coming up against what you've defined here as a red system. And what I find really interesting is, as you've said, is there's a whole kind of matchup process, right? Where I'm describing this for anyone who hasn't been to a team's tournament. It's not just, the tournament organizer matches me up with Tom. What happens is it's team versus team. And there's a little dance and there's a little process that happens, and everyone does it differently. People put out their captains first, or then you put out 2 random teams, or there's a whole structure, right? Like there's like maybe 3 battle plans that kind of get shuffled around, and there's a whole bit of fun, and it does change a little bit. But one of the most important things that I've realized in the team format is I just don't rock up and try to work out the best. There's this whole pre-understanding of the meta, pre-understanding of my opponents. So I guess my question to you is, how on earth do you anticipate the meta? How do you pick factions? And then how on earth do you do the matchup? Because most people are not the Rain Man. They don't know every faction. They don't know every player. They don't know the skill. They don't know how every little thing works. And that putting your players in a favorable position is important, and not putting someone quote unquote under the bus is also important. So paint the picture for me of the meta and the process and the lists and how you anticipate things and then how you position them.
So I think that the meta as a thing is a really hard one to judge. Now, TTS has brought this a little bit closer together, but previous years, you've no idea what other countries do, right? Every country plays the game differently, and whatever the top players do in that country dictates what the other players do, because they try and counter each other, and it creates this sort of inbred meta as such. I suppose by definition, a meta game. Every country has different ones. TTS has brought that a little bit closer together with the advent of more people playing across the pond and doing various remote events. But what we didn't do is try and predict the meta too much, right? So we looked at the way that we win the event is we pair well. And in order to pair well, we need good data. In order to get good data, people need to be playing factions they're comfortable with. Because it's not about knowing what the opponents are bringing. It's knowing, okay, so here's the 8 armies that we've got in front of us. I know I can beat X, Y, and Z. And give me that data. I'll use that to make sure we win the round. In the way that we're trying to, we had chats. We spoke on Discord a few times about what do we expect. We did some mock pairings. We thought, okay, well, these are the 8 armies that we think are going to be there. How does our 8 pair into that? This is before we wrote specific lists. One of the things that we had with Worlds and things is just making sure that we had no duplicates, which, to be fair, was fairly easy. I think the only argument we had was Life Swarm, and that just became a little bit of a meme within the team because everyone wants Life Swarm. So that was the one sort of discussion that we had. I think we had a discussion around Prime as well. Jim may have wanted it for a Stormcast list, but we gave it to Darren, just to keep him sweet because I'd forced him onto Seraphon. So we didn't do an awful lot of, these are the lists that we expect to face, because I think a lot of the time you could look at a faction and you could almost write the list. There's some variants, and sometimes there will be curveballs as well, but often you've got, I think I worked it out as, if you looked at every person versus every team in every scenario, it's over 2,100 data points per player. It's unfeasible, right? You can't ask a person to sit down and say, okay, well, this is this army into this scenario in this team. So players, this is what you're going to take. You tell me what you want to take. We'll make sure that it fits within the team. We had certain players denoted as aggressive players. So we like somebody like Jim Tinsdale, who's a really good Smash player. So if we're going to take dragons, it's going to be him. We looked at. I was the bit of a whipping boy for testing some lists at various events. So we looked at, can you take a Stormcast list with long strikes that doesn't have dragons or fulminators? So if you wanted to take the Living City with dragons and fulminators, and the Stormcast list looked like an Excelsior Annihilator bomb and things, but it's just you're making too many sacrifices. You're making one army 5% better, but the other army 50% worse. And are you even going to play enough games with that army that's 5% better to know that? I don't think you will. I don't think anybody plays enough games with an army where small decisions make a difference, because you're playing a random game, you're playing with a random list against random opponents. You don't know whether things are better than others. You can only go off your experience with it. So lean on the player's experience, what they want to take. Give me a rough idea of a list. We'll share them. We'll veto if there's anything that perhaps doesn't fit. But then you've got 8 players playing something they want to play with the knowledge of how to play it, which means that your data that you get for pairings is infinitely better than if you say, right, you've never played Giants before, take Giants. So Giants is a good example, actually, because I initially told Richie that he was going to play Giants because of the, and to be honest, I think I was wrong in this, I'll hold my hands up, but because of the scenarios and the way that they were done in the pack, there was always a good scenario for Giants every round where you can put it up, and even if it's playing a bad matchup, the scenario is good. You know, like it's a hero mission, or it's one where you can kick objectives backwards, or something like that. But Richie just didn't gel with the army. So we're like, okay, well that's fine. You know, if it may fit with the team, doesn't fit with you, so we won't take it. And I think we were right not to in the end. I would have liked to have seen more Giants there just to prove my point, but there was maybe it's proved my point that no one took them.
Well, I'm sure the hunt played a massive part, giving away 2 victory points for every dead Gargant. But you're right. Like there's a part of it that you need to play what you love, whether it's really good, it's average. You know, obviously when you go to Worlds, there's a higher expectation on your performance. But if you're just going to the average team's tournament, it's better to find a list that you're comfortable with, that you've practiced, you can understand the micro decisions and how you interact. That is far more important than they're just chasing the optimum meta lists in most situations. And I just want to call out one comment before I pass the mic back over to you. Nordo mentioning a really interesting point is that, you know, the other consideration is that the way that teams look at bad matchups, it can actually vary from team to team or nation to nation, because, you know, I might not want to play a certain faction, but actually they don't want to play me too. So, you know, it can be perceived very differently. There's such a mind game in all of this.
One thing that I would have loved to do, but just didn't get the chance at while we were out there, is to actually, so the output that I did here for our pairings, I'd love to see some of the other teams, you know, just to see where, you know, did we out pair, or was our data better? Because, you know, it could be a combination. It could be one or the other. It could be that we thought we had more good matchups than they did, and we were right, or it was the other way around. You know, we were wrong, but we just paired better. And having that output, I'd encourage, even from a learnings process, right? Encourage teams to look at something like this if they've got a spreadsheet, and if you want to share it with me, fantastic, please do. But it'd be nice to see the output from other teams as well, because there's definitely a few times, at least that I can remember, where we paired somebody into somebody else, and they both thought they were going to win. So it's like either somebody's right, or it's close enough that it's actually a game, and it's more of a who played better on the table.
So you've talked about how this is an important part, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Getting favorable matchups will put you in a better position to win the event or win more games overall, because sometimes it's the right armies in the wrong battle plans, or it's the right battle plan with the wrong combination of armies, or whatever it might be, right? So imagine I'm the average Joe. I'm average Joe going to the American Team Championships in a couple of months' time. How do I do this? Do I look at my 4 players or my 6 players and look at ranking systems? Do I match up and look at how the TSN network or the ITC has certain players ranked and think, will I beat them? Am I looking at a faction level? Am I looking at both player and faction? Like, how on earth do I do, what advice would you give to me to understand this traffic light system?
So I'd massively encourage not looking at player. I think you beat yourself before you start at that point. If you look at, somebody who say, okay, using the US team championships, you look at Bill, Emma, Jeremy, those sort of people who will go and they'll 5-0 big GTs over in the US. If you look at them and I can't beat them, it doesn't matter what they're playing. That's no good for the team. And you're encouraging them just to, quote unquote, throw you under the bus at that point, because you've already lost in your head. And Darren's a huge believer in this as well. The psychology is massive. The key thing is the more you know your army, the better your data can be. But don't be afraid to ask people as well. If you go into a team, there's a collaborative effort there. Now, sometimes you don't want too many cooks, but if you know somebody, say somebody plays the opposite faction, talk to them and say, how would you feel into this? How would you play it? And get the feel for it that way. And you'll be wrong sometimes. We were wrong in some of the games. Either in pairings or we made bad decisions on the table or in the scenario or something like that. That's fine. You'll go into your first event. You're never going to go and you're not going to go and win it, are you? You're going there to learn. Encourage, if you can, if you're not there specifically to win the event, try and do the pairings so that you play the better players, or that you play the armies that you don't know an awful lot about. Because you've got, in a singles event, you can only play what's in front of you. In a team event, you've got a choice. So use it to get more practice. Different if you're going with the intention of winning, right? You want to play the armies you can beat. But if you're hovering the mid-tables, use it as an experience. And I think from a future application to international team play, that's more beneficial, because you've got more experience at team events, playing against different armies. So if a team needs an army being used at an event, volunteer for it, learn more armies as well. Things like that.
Do you try to encourage different styles? So if I'm building a team, are you going to say, look, I need one army that's, a flood of boards, zombies, clan rats, goblins. I need one really powerful magic army. I need one aggressive, combat focused army. Do you think about it that way and you try to have like one of every style? Or
it depends on how the pack is. So if as per the pack, if you know where the scenarios fall and you know how the pairings are going to work, you can do that. France did this really well at Worlds. They had certain armies that they were definitely putting into certain scenarios. We also did it in 2019 with Les and the Fire Slayers. We knew there was three objectives in the middle of the board scenarios. So there you go, stick 30 half guard on there and shake an opponent's hand. That sort of thing. You can do that if you know up front what the scenarios are. Something like the Warhammer World team event that we did, everyone played the same scenario. So it's hard to do something like that then, because you don't have that extra leverage in the pairings. I think knowing the scenario and knowing things like that gives the better pairers something extra to do. The better teams will do better more often, because there's just more data points they can work with. So if you know that up front, you can say, okay, well, we're playing marking territory, so let's have a board flood army for that. But also, if you're playing against a good team, you're also telegraphing your pairings a little bit by doing that. If you're looking at an army that is guaranteed to go into one mission, or we think it's guaranteed to go into one mission, you've lost a bit of control, because we know, okay, well, do we respect that and do we try and beat it, or do we just offer it no power whatsoever because it's already going into a scenario that it's good at? And then we lose to that one, but by knowing that, we beat the other three. So there's arguments to both ways. Okay. I think it depends on how the pack is and how the team feels.
Yeah, and I guess I'm asking this because if I'm building a team, I'm thinking, right, well, I need an army that is very strong in magic, so I'm going to try to find a Tzeentch, a Teclis, a Nagash, some type of a Seraphon. And I need to have that. So when I go into my matchups, if I do happen to find a magic focused opponent, I'm going to try to match up my strongest magic to their strongest magic, or I'll try to avoid them and let them kind of.
I think it depends on the quality of player as well, and without being disrespectful to anybody. So we did what were the events called? Blood Tithe, London-based team event run by Mark Wilson. So we did those as a club. So at that time, this was sort of 2017-ish, 2018 maybe. There was myself, Tony Moore, Darren Palmer, Nige Chilton. Darren doesn't really play AoS, but he'll do team events. Nige plays, often does okay, 2 and 3, 3 and 2. And then me and Tony are the people that will generally go and do reasonable at events. So we have to pair with that in mind. So we know, okay, so we give Darren a job. So he took Stormcast, Shootcast with 4 dropping Celestar Ballistas and things, because we knew there was hidden missions, and that's where some of your points came from. And there was some of like Killer Hero or something like that. Like, you're not going to win any games. You're going to get 4 points around. You're going to drop your ballistas. You're going to kill something, and you can walk away. It's fine. Nige will give you the 50-50s if we can. You will give you a strong army. Like, he used Fire Slayers one year, Seraphon the next. So he'll be our seesaw. He'll be in the middle. Kind of with the pressure on him almost. But then me and Tony have to pair and back ourselves to win every game if we're going to do well. Because that's how we win the rounds. I think we came second one year. Me and Tony both went 5-0. Nige went 3-2. Darren went 0-5, but scored us the points that tipped us over the other teams. And I think by knowing the players on the team, you can do that. If you've got 4 incredible players, you don't have to think about it in that sort of micro style. You can just say, okay, we're going to make sure that we pair people into good games, and we'll rely on their table etiquette and their quality of play to win us the event. Some teams can't do that, and that's where the granularity comes in, and that's where I think I get a lot of practice with pairings, because I've done all of these, right? I've done the teams with the weaker players. I've done the player and pairings. I've done the non-player and pairings. I've done 6-player. I've done 8-player, 4-player, different packs, things like that. So it shows how different some of the events can be.
Yeah, it's an important element. And I guess I'm asking this as well is because I saw on Twitter you're stepping down from running the team. So Team England, you are the captain, but you are stepping down. I think you're still going to be involved, but you're not going to be captain. So I guess
hopefully. Yeah, and that's up to the new captain, right?
I think definitely you have a shot. But like there's intrinsic knowledge over time. And I think when I was talking to the Australian team recently, I was talking to Matt Tyrrell. Matt's the current captain of Australia. Yeah. And he had mentioned that, financially it's a bit expensive for him to be going to overseas, which I fully appreciate. To be spending $5,000, $7,000 to go to a tournament that could be your family vacation is a tough sell every year. And I guess, you learn so much from the team's format. How do you retain it? And then how do you pass it on to other members? So, and that's kind of why I wanted to have this discussion with you, just so I can get into your head to understand, do I match up against the player? Do I start building lists and going, right, I really need you? Because like what happens if I have a Lumineth player who wants to run their Sentinels, and now I've got a Daughters of Cain player who wants to run all the Bow Snakes? Is that 2 of the same list? Am I asking myself for trouble? Should I talk to my player and say, hey, what about a melee focused snake? Or what about witch elves? Like, should I have that discussion early on, or should I just roll with the punches and have 2 similar styles of lists, knowing that they meet the pack? The pack doesn't say they can't do it.
So funnily enough, that kind of conversation came up when we were talking about lists for Worlds this year. We looked at Luke was our last player to sort of settle on an army, and he was sort of flirting back and forth between a few things. And one of the things that sort of led us to where we were with the Lumineth was that we actually had no shooting armies. And at one point we had a conversation where, do we have too many shooting armies? Are we weak to double turns across the board? Can we just lose games on dice rolls? So we flipped back to things that were a little bit safer in the Nurgle and the Knights of the Empty Throne and things like that. But then we had 0 shooting. Well, actually, shooting holds power in pairings, because some things just do not like it. Iron Jaws, things like that don't. And I think the Lumineth is the best version of it, because it also has the foxes, it has the movement dictation and things like that. And Luke had played it before, so that we ended up with that. But yeah, it's definitely a consideration. You've got to think how your armies fit within the team's pairing strategy. So things like that definitely do come into consideration. In terms of retaining the knowledge, just practice. We did a few, probably not enough mock pairing sessions once the lists came out. We knew our first round opponents. We did a few with that. So what we did there is me, Jack, and Luke, who were doing the pairings. We have a Team England Discord. We sat in one voice channel, and then the rest of the team sat in another. And they were playing the other team, and we played the England game. Now, there's benefit to that, absolutely. But what I was really conscious of is not doing too much of it, because they might not do what we think they'll do. And if you become too practiced and too formulaic, if they throw a curveball, or it's a curveball to you but not to them, all of a sudden your plan's thrown out the window. So we did it just to see, do we fit well into this team, but actually not to a point where we said, right, okay, this is.
I've lost you. I think you. Go on, Tom.
Am I still at voice?
Yeah, you're good now. You're
back. Sorry, I just knocked the microphone.
So Tom's so excited about pairings.
Yeah, so things like that are key. Not being over practiced, because teams might not play the way you think they'll play. Players might not play the way you think they'll play. You could play 2 Thunder Lizard armies that are identical. One person will just full send, and you'll be like, what on earth is going on? Because everyone else that you play doesn't. So we made sure we were slightly practiced, but not to the point where things became formulaic, because then we can't be flexible. I think reflection on pairings and data is key if you're going to do well at events. Look at the output, see where the event, you could almost tell where the event was won and lost. So if we look back at that picture with the of our output, one of the key ones, if you can bring it back up.
Yeah, sorry, what I was going to bring up next was this one, because I think a bit of practice holding a trophy. Clearly, Dan Bradshaw there practicing in the pool was critical to your success. I was going to bring that up. Pairings.
So just to go back onto the picture of me that looks ridiculous. There's a tradition of England captains, if they win the Ashes, that they hold it above the head, but to a point where the belly sticks out over the shorts a little bit. So
I wasn't going to shame you at all.
No, that was on purpose. I had to get somebody to take the photo and make sure, like, can you see my belly? That was the key thing of that photo. Get down and make sure it's like the right angle and things like that. So one of the key ones here, if you look at the France round, is the top line, James, with so he was our only red scenario for the entire event. He was in a game that he thought was red, we thought was kind of 1.5, like red to amber. And it was
what made it red, by the way? I want to pause here. What makes it red? Is it that James, with the list against the France opponent, was it's an unwinnable thing, or was it the battle plan? Was it a confidence level? Did James just go, nah, I don't think I'm going to win this one?
It's more on confidence than anything else. I think that's where a lot of people win and lose games. It's Iron Jaws. They can do Iron Jaws things. It was a 1-drop as well. So 1-drop versus 1-drop is often key on the roll. The reason it was a 1 over a 2, so the way we did it was 3 was I should win and I should get 16 points-ish. Amber was it's dice or scenario dependent. And if I lose, I shouldn't lose big. Reds were more chance of winning than losing, but the biggest thing was, if I lose, it will be big. So if I'm going to lose, it's going to be nil, it's going to be 1 point or something like that, because things are going to snowball. So things like Iron Jaws, we paired really badly into Iron Jaws as a team, just because no one's particularly confident that they can just hold the tide. Because if they get the smashing and bashing and they do what they do, they run through you.
Was James Stormcast?
James was using the dragons.
He was Dragon Stormcast. So I guess when you're Dragon Stormcast versus Iron Jaws,
it's a fight. Someone's getting 20-0'd, right?
Yeah, and I guess depends on like how many drops somebody is. So if I'm up against the 1-drop Iron Jaws that can turn 1 charge me, I'm probably not feeling confident that I can handle and screen, and why I might flag myself as a red as opposed to an amber, as an example.
Exactly. It's not like red isn't I'm definitely going to lose. It's more often than not, I'll lose. But if I lose, it's going to be a big loss. So we can calculate that into what we think is going to happen with a round. But if you look there, he was a red scenario into a red matchup. The scenario was power in numbers, maybe a 6 objective one. So the dragons don't really do well into 6 objective missions. But then he got 14 points out of it, which was massive. He lost, I think he had 3 models left at the end of turn 2, rallied a dragon, which is kind of cheesy, but then managed to come back and win the game. And it's games like that sometimes that will win you the event. It's not the Jack going, average 19.71 points across the event, because we pair for that. It's where things defy the numbers that you win games. It's where the player skill sometimes just comes out, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and people who listen. Sorry,
one of the key things that we did, that you can see from that, is we made sure that armies were always playing into good scenarios. So we ranked the scenarios independently of the armies, because again, conscious I don't want to give players 2,100 data points to give me decisions, because fatigue and things, and it's just unfeasible. So even in most of our red matchups, the team was playing into good scenarios, which may have brought the 1s to 2s, but we didn't go that far into it. We said, okay, you're playing a bad matchup, but you're in this mission, and people are like, cool, that's fine. I'll do what I can with it. And a lot of the time that resulted in them winning the game, which I think, again, those points that you sneak that you maybe shouldn't have got are the points that tip you over the edge. Yeah, and as Darren said there, that if you take Jim's points out and Jim got 0 against France, we lose the round. That's not to say that Jim's the only person that did well against France, but there's those things there that you can draw from. That's where the team wins.
It's an example of where a player wasn't expected to win. They weren't feeling confident, yet defied the odds because they had practiced with their list, or they had done something that had swung. And yeah, to Darren's point, that result swung the round in their favor. So just as an FYI, some tournaments will cap victory points. So I think it's Runax. Don't quote me on this. It's been a couple of years because of COVID. But there was I think from memory, Runax was like a maximum of 70 victory points could have been scored across the 4 games. So so all it took was 3 major victories and I think a draw, and that would cap you.
Yeah.
But in some others, it could be right. So it's 5 players, 3 need to win. That becomes your victory. And I guess it's hard to talk about teams specifically because every team format is so different. But you can see, I guess, the picture I want to paint here is that people's role in the team isn't always to win. It's about denial. It's about not major losses. It could be a draw. It could be a minor loss. It could just be to score your battle tactics. If you can do your 5 battle tactics, that could be enough to score your team the points that they need to win the round, or to break the tie that might be happening on the ladder.
Yeah, that's it. And I think knowing the pack and knowing where your wins come from, and how you win the event is key to how you build the team, build the armies, do the pairings. Because if an event doesn't have a cap, you want to make sure that if you're against the team that you'll beat, that you really want to beat them.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you're playing a tournament, yeah, you're 100% right. If you look at the incentive structure, if it's unlimited points, you just want to absolutely annihilate and get as many victory points. Everyone does their grand strategy, their battle tactics, however they're scoring. You just need to max.
Which isn't fun for anyone, I find. I think introducing a cap gives you the opportunity to take some risks with pairing. So when we did the Warhammer World event, I made some decisions that were questionable from a results point of view, but were good data points, good learning.
I'm going to call up Lee Bromley's comment here. Wow, just listening to Tom about captaincy is blowing my mind. Whoever takes over from him needs a big set of grapefruits. He said balls, but I'll say grapefruits. But yeah, there's a lot that comes into this, and I hope if you're listening to this, you're not feeling overwhelmed. I think this is all about the experience that Tom has gained over time, working with some great minds. You know, you've talked about Jack, you've talked about Russ, you've talked about, you know, Darren. Like, there's so many great people in the community.
Yeah.
It's not Tom who's doing this. It's a combination of ideas. I remember the last team's tournament, it was myself, Dan Brewer, Liam Bernard Blue, and Hayden Walker. We all kind of stayed together. You know, we all came across the spreadsheet, and as a team, we developed our traffic light system.
Yeah.
As a team, we pulled together. We shared our lists. We go, right, you know, what happens if you know, Iron Jaws are really popular at the moment. What happens if you're paired up into Iron Jaws? And we start formulating these scenarios, these plans, these ideas. And, you know, through that discussion, the captain ultimately has a better idea of who to pair you against. And you know, because there's a lot of pressure, and the captain can't know everything about every army in every situation. With so many battle plans and so many variations, even Stormcast, you could have shooting Stormcast, you could have like Vindictors and just like bodies that hold the objective. You could have dragons. Like, there's so many variations.
So you know, as a non-playing captain, I was very, very specific with the team to say, look, I know the matchups. You know, I can do that. But what I'll back myself to do is, if you give me the right data, I'll use that to pay. I'll use that to pair, or me, Jack, and Luke will use that to pair into winning rounds. You know, I'm not going to sit there and know that you're going to be good into that. You need to tell me this. Give me the info. Then let's go and use it. Which, in some cases, if the data's bad, then things go wrong. So it's credit to everybody for giving me the right data. Jack and Luke were incredible as well, helping with the pairings. You know, we sat there. We always double checked. We had the chat, and we knew, you know, before even a card went down, I'd show it to both of them just to make sure, you know, are we on the same page? Sometimes we weren't. Sometimes it was a little bit of a discussion. The majority of the time, though, the person who wasn't on board came around when we had a little chat. Something that we did before each round, we knew who we were paired against, was we'd sit down as a team. We would go through the lists and the pairings, mainly because players had gone away and done this on their own. You know, they'd gone through their own feelings and things. Whereas now we're sat there as a team for the first time properly with all the information and the data. Let's just double check. And we changed a few things, not loads. I wasn't a big fan of, you know, everyone's changing everything, because if Luke tells Darren that a matchup is bad, but Darren thinks it's good, I'll go with Darren. Darren's the one playing the army, you know, to use them as an example. And that happened quite a few times across the team. You know, somebody saying, well, I'm good into Stormcast, and then Stormcast players saying, well, actually, I think I beat you. Well, I don't care. You're not playing each other. He's playing the other guy. You're playing somebody else. And then the thing that we sat down, the three of us before each round, me, Jack, and Luke, was, okay, so who do we drop first? We know the scenario. We know the list. We've got the data. The only thing we can do 100% knowledge now without any variables is who we put down first. And that dictates then, you know, if you start getting good matchups straight away, they're on the back foot. They're trying to take risks and things like that. So making sure that we knew, you know, do we either put somebody down who's got the most bad matchups in the hope that they give us one, we just take it away and off we go, or they give us one that's a good matchup that they think might be good and we think's good. We take that and hopefully we're right and they're wrong. And then from there, you've got the confidence. Then we delete the columns and the rows from the spreadsheet, and we see, okay, so we've got this left, and so yeah.
So this is probably a really good time to actually just rewind for a second, because people might not know the matchup process, and I guess I'd love to hear just a little bit about how you start laying down your players. So on the average team tournament, the average, not specifically, the captains will formulate strategy, right? So whether it might be a priority role, and Team England or Tom, for example, let's say it's Tom and I. Tom might put down a player. He puts down a player name on the table, and as the captain, the other captain, I get to match up the first pairing. Then what might happen is then my role would then be put two of my players down, and then Tom can pick one of them and just start. So basically, it's like school where, like, you know, when you pick people for teams, like, I want you to play here and I'll play here, and it's this basically everyone should
sometimes for this and not the school ones, but.
And sometimes the captain will put themselves out first because they think, look, I'll try to get the bad matchup first, or, you know, there's a lot of strategy and thoughts, and, you know, do you keep your best player first? Like, how do you match up? when you do the matchup process, do you put your worst out first, your best out first? Do you look at the battle plan? Like, what goes through your mind through the matchup process and who you offer?
Yeah, it's different again per event. So one example, Brotherhood, where we did with the hand-drawn shirts and things, I asked Chris to trial the timeout system that we were thinking about for ETC and Worlds, just so I could feedback to the council to say, does it work? And it did. But we had 6 players, and you could have a non-player to do the timeouts there, or you could have a player, but they could only do them if their game was finished. So I took Beastclaw Raiders, borrowed the army, having never really played with them before. I'd opted, well, I'm just going to throw me down. Give me what you want. I'll win. I might lose, but at least I'll be then available to help the rest of the team win their games. Completely misread it. So that was a bad idea in general, because the impact of me on the other 5 games, although isn't as much as me just winning a game. So I sometimes threw a game to help the others. Actually, in a 6-player event, a loss is big, especially with something like Beastclaw Raiders, because if they lose, they don't generally get points. So that was something that we learned, always having a non-player, because you don't want anybody playing the games with a thought that they've got to help others as well. Also, playing captains sometimes subconsciously will pair well for themselves, not even completely subconsciously. So for other events, again, 4 players is a little bit different, because you don't have as much control over each of the pairings. There's less variable. You pick 2 matchups each, So we did 1 4-player event. We randomized it. Actually, we just wanted to get an idea and a feel for different matchups. Again, that's not something I'd suggest doing, especially when you've got polarized armies.
Can you explain what Darren's saying? Because I've never played a teams tournament where there's timeouts. So I'm imagining it's very much like the NFL, right? Where the coach can go, right, timeout, we all come together, we kind of strategize. Is that kind of like what happens?
So timeouts was something that I think it was me that thought of it, but if it wasn't, I'll hold my hands up. From doing the 2019 ETC as a non-player, I felt a little bit pointless during the round. But I was probably the only non-player, maybe Guillaume as well, actually. So maybe 2 of us. And me and Guillaume just ended up talking for a little bit instead. But I was like, okay, so how do we make the non-playing person more important? How do we make it more of a sports team sort of feel, where you've got a manager or something like that? For the other teams where English isn't the first language, they're unfortunately forced to speak English at the table. So how do we give them the opportunity to de-stress and take some time to talk to somebody in their own language and just sort of, come out of the situation a little bit? So we came up with, okay, well, let's give players a timeout. So every game, every player can take a timeout. 3 minutes, I believe it was. 5 was bandied about, but I think 5's too much. So a 3-minute timeout, which only the player can call. So I can't walk up to Darren, see that he's made a mistake, pull him away from the table. That's because otherwise there's too much emphasis on a non-player then. You're basically playing 2 versus 1. The player can ask for a timeout, and it could be for any reason. It could be just to tell me how the game's going, although they could do that without. They just want maybe take some time away from the table. Ask for specific strategy advice. So a non-player, according to the pack, can walk around. They can ask how the game's going. They can ask about the board state. They can ask a player can ask the coach how a round is going. Are we winning the round? Are we losing the round? Not granular or anything like that. Timeout, you can talk about anything. You can take 3 minutes and talk about the weather if you wanted to. Ultimately, you're playing a chess clock. The timeout is on your time, and it can only be called by the player that needs it on their turn. So they can't interrupt a opponent's turn for it. And it's just an opportunity to come away and talk to somebody else about your game in your own language, which I think is key for the other countries. They can walk away, they can talk Dutch, French, Spanish, German, whatever they want to their coach for a certain length of time. Gives them a little bit of a break away from the table and things like that. So yeah, I think it's one of the best things in the pack, personally. And if that may be because I came up with it, but I genuinely can't remember.
sometimes you can't see the forest from the trees. And I think, even like in a one-on-one, sometimes there's a lot of value actually going around the other side of the table, looking at how your opponent is seeing the battle, and a different perspective can really change the way you play the game. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll walk around the other side just to look at how the battle looks on the other side. And Darren's mentioning here, you can't give specific, feedback. You can't tell them, go kill this, do this, this is the order of your battle tactics next. But it can be really, you can alleviate a lot of stress when I hear that two of my teammates have already won. So all we need to do is score one more win, and little Billy is looking like that the battle's going to win. So my role now, I can de-stress a little, still push, but still go through the motion.
And it depends on how the coach wants to do it. So in round 6 at Worlds, Richie was playing Peter Orkman. He was the last to finish, and we'd already won the round and the event at that point. We're like, do we tell him? Do we just leave him to play the game? Do we tell him we've already won, or do we just let him stress and play the game? And we opted to let him stress because we'd all had a few beers at that point anyway. But going back to the point on pairings, there's so many different ways that you can do it. We opted for a different strategy at Six Nations than we did for Worlds. That was Laurie and Darren doing the pairings. I was a player. I didn't get involved in the pairings. And it was, so the way that they did it was just buy the greens early, get the good matchups early on, put the opponents under pressure, which is a really solid way of doing it. For Worlds, we just added a little bit more granularity to it. We had a rule where if we were offered a green matchup, we would always take it. We'd always take the green matchup, because why not? I think we deviated twice, where it was quite clear that by taking the green matchup that was offered was also green for everybody else, whereas the amber matchup was red for some others. So actually, okay, so in the wider world, that's better for the team. Might not be better for the individual player, but we'll make sure we tell them that, the reasons why, and what they're expected. Give them the lift up still if it's a. So a lot of the times that's how we did it. Always had an eye to the final 4 pairings at Worlds, because that's where a little bit more info. You can guarantee that 2 players are playing certain scenarios at that point because of the way the final bit works, the same way as a 4-player event pairs in general. So things like that we use to keep an eye on the spreadsheet and just make sure that as the spreadsheet's shrinking, that it's not getting more red or amber. Making sure that it's still there's still a balance, still gives us choices.
Yeah,
I think if you take the greens too early, you could end up with 4 greens, 4 reds.
Yes, yeah, and I think
you'll win an event doing that, but you might not always win an event doing that.
Yeah, as captain and as a team's format, you need to look at the overarching round as opposed to just getting the quick wins, because then it does make things a little bit harder. You need to look at who are my players. It's almost like a game of chess. Like, who are my players? What's their best moves? And how, as a team, we can best position them, as opposed to, look, we know we got these 2 really good matchups, and then we're hoping that the other 2 are favorable for us.
Yeah. I know Darren's philosophy on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, he's big on the psychology of Warhammer. And I love it too, and his theory is if you get 2 green matchups early on that are big 20-0 smashes in half an hour, the impact that has on the rest of the team is amazing. Wow, we've already got 2 wins in and things like that. So there's a massive merit to that sort of demoralization almost of another team, knowing that they're 40-0 down after 2 results. Things like that.
Well, how many times have you seen a battle where someone beats themselves and or they think that they're losing, and then somehow they win the match at the end, and then it's the psychology behind it. You're like, oh, actually, I was seeing the world a lot more negative than it actually was.
Yeah.
And sometimes even, like I said, you walk away, you take that 3-minute break, come back to the table refreshed, not stressing about your dice rolls, you're, taking a different perspective, and you're able to, perfect example, right? Over the weekend, I was at a tournament, I did really well. And I had a game, right, where I was against Nighthawk, right? And I'm Daughters of Cain. I'm Drakey Ganeth, so not Drakey, was it Drakey? Whatever Ren -1 is. I'm getting all the Ren in the world. I'm up against Nighthaunt. Marathi, 9 wounds taken, miscasts, 3 mortal wounds, dies in turn 3. I negged myself out. I got really upset with myself. I'm like, I can't believe it, right? Because Morathi was going to fight me out of this. And I took a moment, like I refreshed myself. And I think if I stayed in that negative state, I definitely would have continued to lose the game. But, you know, I stood back and go, right, well, what can I do? What can possibly be achieved? And how about I just refocus on scoring my battle tactics, you know, pushing for the objectives, and ultimately I actually got a draw. Yeah. So the psychology behind it and keeping
I bet you
your
felt
team
better about that
motivated.
draw than some wins that you've had.
Oh, it was amazing. Like, it was so good because, you know, in my mind, Morathi was so important at that particular time. And I couldn't believe I rolled a double 1, then 3 mortal wounds, not 2, 3. So going back to the psychology, yes, absolutely critical. Maybe Darren and I need to talk. I've got a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner certificate. We'll start talking about science. We'll start talking about neurons and start talking about all the good things when it comes to behavioral science. But
so I'm playing in the T Sports Champs list this weekend, and my list is on that sort of wavelength. I think opponents are going to think they're winning for most of the game, but I don't think they will. And I'll hold my hands up if I go 0-5. I'm completely wrong, but the list doesn't look like it does an awful lot on paper. But I think there's tricks to it that people might not see and things like that.
And that's probably another part as well, is not under expecting or under anticipating what an opponent can do, because while it might look like a really green matchup, right? Let's say it's, I don't know, Blades of Corn. You're like, oh man, I should defeat Blades of Corn really easy. What you don't know is this person has been doing really well with them. They've been playing with them for years. They've got a lot of experience, and they can force your hand. So, you know, I think what you were saying earlier about not over practicing and over creating scenarios can be very powerful.
I think there's 2 things to take from that as well. You know, you look at the people at Worlds that owned their army, despite it not being the best army. Ronya with the Nighthorn, and can't remember his name. There's a Polish chap that used Slanesh. One went 5-1, the other went 6-0. Because opponents will underestimate them. Oh, so it's Nighthorn, it's a 3, it's fine. I'll beat it. And they won't give it the respect it deserves. So we knew that if we played Sweden or Poland, we really needed to look at that list again. Like, okay, well, let's just talk about it. Because one of the things that I'm big on with teams events, and it becomes bigger the bigger the team, is tricks don't work as much. Because you're not rocking up to a table, fighting something for the first time and learning what it does. You get the list in advance in most cases. You've got a group of people to talk to about it. Someone will know it. Somebody will know the trick. So little gotchas don't work as well in teams. Me and Darren are big fans of, in singles events, only having to beat everybody once. Because once you beat them once, you change the army. It doesn't matter. You know, if you're going to play to win an event, take something that they won't have seen before. Ask the questions, make them make the wrong decisions, know your army better than they know it. And you'll win an event, potentially, and then you walk away, you think, okay, I've done that, now what? You know, and keep that cyclical thing going with armies and making sure that you don't rock up with the same thing more than once. Which is, some people can do, some people can't. You know, it's...
And I think as well, like, one thing I'm picking out of this is it's the knowledge and having someone, either it's yourself or whether it's having at least a council of people on your team that can help pick apart lists and understand, like, right, this is the linchpin. You know, you might not have the most favorable matchups or things like that, but I know that the Grot army does this, so you need to look out for these things. Or you know that this is the wave of IDK and this is what they're going to try to do, and look for these things. Because again, there are so many factions, so many combinations of factions, it's impossible to understand the structure of everyone. But having some smart people and someone you can collaborate with, and if you don't have those experiences, Tabletop Simulator, or what I'm hearing from you is before the event, you went out and hunted those events. You don't have an IDK player in your community? Cool, go find someone somewhere else. Go play on Tabletop Simulator. Get some experience from IDK. See the filth and understand from the way they're structuring it, so that when you come into it, you've got some experience.
Yeah, exactly. We had conversations as a team about, okay, so player X hasn't played against Army Y. So can anybody just jump on TTS and run through a few games? Like, well, is there a point in me doing it? Is there a point in me playing? So I've never played Seraphon before. I'm not one of those people. Is there a point in me picking up, writing a Seraphon list or copying somebody's Seraphon list, using it on TTS? Because I might give you the wrong idea, because I'll play it differently to the people who know what they're doing will do. Whether I win or lose, because you don't know what you're doing, I don't know what I'm doing. No one's learning. No one's actually walking away from that with better info than they came in with. Arguably, we're both worse off from a data point of view. And the more times you do that, the more it reinforces wrong decisions. So I had a chat with Guillaume from France around their practice and their preparation. They played an unbelievable amount of games against the English lists. I don't know whether they did it with everybody else. They probably did with Denmark and Sweden and some of the other top teams, Wales as well. But there's a danger there in that their players might not play their list the same way that we do. In the same way for pairings, you don't want those formulaic, this is what happens things stuck in your head, because then you don't adapt. So yeah, Darren Jones basically popped at the same point there as well.
Yeah, it's all about what I can do. It's about, I've always had a belief that you can't control the cards that are dealt in life, but you can control how you respond to them. And winning might not always be the situation. It's forcing hands. There's a whole bunch of things you can possibly do. But I think what I'm hearing from you the most, it's about preparation. It's about understanding and doing your best that you can. When I've gone to team tournaments, it's not necessarily what happens on the day. It's all the things that happen leading up to the event. And I think what I'm understanding and hearing from you, Tom, is it's about the team chats and being productive. It's about deliberate practice. It's about going in and whether you see the lists in advance or not, going out and getting practice so you can make better decisions on the spot. And overall, collectively, your team makes better decisions. And when you come together in between rounds and you talk about strategies and you look at pairings, you have more positive reference points that can, again, ultimately lead to better outcomes. You can't just rock up with the 4 best players. You can't just rock up with 4 great players and try to hopefully steamroll the event. There's a whole dynamic that you need to start thinking about.
Like the whole chat productivity is key, so don't get me wrong, in the England groups, we had plenty of unproductive chat as well. But I think that's WhatsApp groups in general. But what I did quite early on is I moved a separate chat. So like, if you're going to talk rubbish, keep it in there. This is our list chat, right? So this is where we want proper discussion, because I don't want to be sifting through hundreds of messages we should have used Discord. We didn't. I think that was a mistake on my part. And Luke tried to get us on Discord instead. Discord for me, I play World of Warcraft. That's my World of Warcraft chat. And I don't know why I can't just do both. But that's just so. One of the things that we wanted to make sure is the more prepared we are when we go in, the calmer we are. England as a country, rightly or wrongly, I think we're seen as kind of like the ambassadors for AoS. We're from England, we're where the game comes from. We've got a target on our backs. We win the events. So I don't want to be the first captain to lose an event. So the expectation is that we go, but I wanted to make sure that we set the right example as well. So by being prepared, by everyone knowing their role and not being bothered about losing where they're supposed to lose and being absolutely ecstatic if they win where they're not supposed to win, puts us in a good light. We look good in front of our opponents. It gives us, we know our lists, we can talk to them. We don't have to, we're playing under a chess clock, but we don't have to be like super micro on it because we're going to finish the game. We can be nice people. We always make sure after the games, talk to people and things like that, ask questions, and just make sure nobody goes out to an event to win best sports. It's impossible, right? You can't, it's not something you win, it's something you earn. And we went out there, obviously we won and we got sports in 2019. Absolutely amazing, overwhelmed. This year, events bigger, more competitive probably than it was in 2019. We just wanted to make sure to go out and not sort of fall victim to that competitive nature. We wanted to go out and make sure that we still, with a team of 6 new people as well, 6 people that hadn't been to Worlds before, I think, maybe 5 from memory, that we're still those ambassadors that we were in 2019. And, I don't know if there's something from the French war game stream where they announced where we won sports, and I broke down. I was that to me, we knew we'd won, we didn't know we'd got sports, and that was almost as important. That to do both again was fantastic.
So first off, congratulations. I remember hearing about England getting best sports as well, because people you've got a target on your back, especially when you have play testers who might be in your community playing. So England is always the team to beat. How do I win best sports? And obviously that sounds bizarre, right? But it sometimes for people it's hard to be really competitive and try to win games and be best sport. Because often sports is usually tied to, like, I don't want to say the loser. Please don't quote me that way.
No, I think
the best sports are normally the person who wins, who doesn't win very much, and it can be token sometimes.
It can be consolation prize. And I think this comes because it's so subjective, right? It's a team voting at Worlds specifically. It's 8 or 9 people voting for one. It's not everybody has a vote. So it's leaving an impression on the team, making sure that you're good on the table, clean on the table, no drama, no cheating, no issues like that, which sometimes will mar a game, obviously. But sometimes, at singles events, it's the person who perhaps didn't do so well, took a strange army, or I'm going to dress up, I'm going to play greenskins, I'm going to shout "Wah," things like that, and to me, that's not sportsmanship, but that's what people think sportsmanship is in a singles event. When you're in a competitive team environment, I think sportsmanship becomes what it should be. It's about doing things in the right way. It's not about being quirky or zany or something like that. But you can't go and win best sports. You can't target it because of how subjective it is.
You've danced around my topic. Let's get into the granularity. Give me some feedback, right? So if I want to be best sport, right? So some of the things that come to my mind would be to have intentions clear, right? So when I'm about to make a roll, I will announce before I roll, I'm hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s. So my opponent knows what they're looking for. I will make a discussion to say if a dice lands on a piece of terrain and it's not flat. By the way, I roll in a dice box, but you make it clear that this is a re-roll situation. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do to make the communication really clear. What else can I do to be perceived as a good sport in a competitive sense?
In a competitive sense, clean play. So being really upfront with your opponent, talk to them. What kind of game do they want? Be adaptable to them. You as a player in England, we always say you probably play a lot more than they do in a competitive sense, just because we have events every weekend if we want. So talk to them about the type of game they want. Adapt yourself to them. So the Danish round, actually, right before we started, they did something really cool. They said, look, this is how we play as a team, not individually. This is how we play. If it's okay with you, we'll share dice. We'll do this. We don't do any takebacks. We don't, this is, and we do it this way as a team. And I thought that was amazing. That was really, really good, because then it sets us up. Okay, well, this is the type of game they expect. It's the type of game that they want as well. So if you're going to be harsh with them, that's not being unsporting. That's playing the way they want to play. Yeah. That's sporting in my eyes. Talk to them, talk to your opponent about, cock dice is always a key one. Wobbly model, terrain, things like that, which Worlds was very good at kiboshing that straight away. But at a local event, can I do this before the game, not when it matters? Because when it matters, you're both going to disagree because it's going to be favourable for one or the other. And that's where issues start to come in. Agree it beforehand. Things like just rocking up with the right stuff, knowing what your stuff does, which is quite key. Having a tape measure, having your dice, not sort of being clean even. This is my corner of the board that all of my stuff goes on. If you want to teleport something there, I'm going to be annoyed, but I'll move it to the other side.
Yeah.
The other things, if you're talking to an opponent, I'll use Toby as an example against France, I think it was, where there was an opportunity where the French guy, it may not have been France, so apologies if it was, the French guy asked for a take back. And Toby, like both knuckles on the table, leant over to him and just really politely said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow that because of X, Y, and Z." And the French guy would, "Oh, okay, it's a Welsh. Sorry, Darren." And the opponent was like, "Yeah, it's fine." And again, I think it's, if you're going to do stuff, do it in the right way.
Yeah,
everyone.
It's amazing. I was just gonna say, it's amazing how much the early conversation of etiquette. Like one of the comments that kind of caught me was when I talked to the Australian team, they were talking about how was it mystical terrain? I think it was. I can't remember what it was. There was a scenario where there was
where they were removing models from further away than an inch from the terrain or something.
Yeah, there was. Oh no, it was a protection of Nagash. It was protection of Teclis. It was Teclis's protection of Hish, where they were talking about wholly within versus taking away models, similar to mystical, where if you take away the model that's within 1 inch of mystical and protection. Like anyway, we all have different ways of playing the game. And I think it's that conversation and the intention of, like, I played a game the other day at the tournament and my opponent wanted to take back. And I said, look, I'm happy for you to do it, but remember this, if I want to do it as well. Like, we've got to be clear on when we can do something, when we can't do something.
Yeah, I think it's that's a hard one to do as well. We all want to win. Something that Darren said there as well. End of each round, you walk away as a team. You've won or you've lost. We're lucky that we won all 6 rounds. Some bigger than others, but we'd never sort of like chest bump as a team and go, yeah. We kind of do a bit of that in private, but we wouldn't do that in front of the opponents.
Yeah.
I always sat down with the coach or the captain of the other team for a little bit afterwards and just said, how do you think it went? How did your pairings go? What did you think happened in various bits? And they were asking me for help and advice as well, always making sure to offer it, because at the end of the day, we want the scene, the overall scene, to get better, which is why doing things like this, I think, is really cool. Here is a complete brain dump of my thoughts as a pairer and a captain. People will walk away with what they want to walk away with, but hopefully everyone grows from it.
I think the other one I mentioned, Tom, is, and I try to celebrate my opponent's victories as much as, like, when I say victories, I don't mean like major victories, right? Like if they're like, right, I'm going for a dice roll, I need a 10 plus charge. If they hit a 10 up charge, I want to high five them. I want to congratulate them. I know it's obviously a bad thing for me, but it's a collaborative experience. And the more you can do that and you can create a game, the less tension and the less stress that happens on the table. And we have a free-flowing game.
I wish I had that much control over my emotions. When we played the France round and I watched every single person lose a priority roll at the same time. Oh my God, what's going on?
I don't celebrate priority rolls, but like
no
sometimes like there's those, but like there's some things that you can do to create sportsmanship, and obviously it's not about gaming and trying to get all those points, but there is a way to be competitive but also a good sport, and they're not mutually exclusive.
You only see true sportsmanship when it's unrewarded. I think that's correct. Sports points at events I hate because it's fake. There's all sorts of weird stuff that goes on with sports votes being part of the final standings of an event. I think a lot of places are going away from that. But all you can do as a player is present yourself in the way that you think your opponent wants to play, and that's it. They let them then decide. There's none of this going around after the event. Oh, our favorite game. You got our sports favorite and things like that. It's fake. It doesn't get anybody anywhere. This whole press tour after a tournament, high-fiving your opponents.
When sports points get involved, I like them to be defined. So it's like, was the person on time? Were they clear? Very metricated, very like tick boxes, like yes or no, and it's very defined, as opposed to, because we both work in sales, right? Customer service is like rate us out of 0 to 10. And I never give someone a 10, not because they don't deserve it, but like that means they exceeded my expectation.
Yeah, they could not have done anything better, which is
but it's very unlikely. But to give someone a 5 out of 5 without a metric can be quite tough, because like, did I have this most amazing game? And like, it was, we're basically BFFs? No, but by not giving them 5, I'm punishing them, and like it's not fair.
Yeah,
So,
and without those metrics, take backs are one of those things that occur quite a lot. If I offer a take back, is that sportsmanship? I don't think it is. I prefer to play a cleaner game of Warhammer. I don't ask for take backs. I'll often give them, if they're offered, depending on the scenario. And I think that's my own fault, right? If it was round 1 of an event, I'm more likely to give a take back than at round 5, and I shouldn't do that. But that's competitive nature. So I think if we all get away from that, not to say that no one can ever give a take back, but I don't think that's what sportsmanship should be. It's fair to say if there's like a gotcha moment, or if they didn't see something or something like that, it's like, look, I'll point something out in some cases. But again, this is different at different events. World's level caliber of sportsmanship is not the same as local tournament sportsmanship.
World Masters, whatever the championship, completely different, because the expectation of the caliber of the person knows what they're doing, versus if I'm rocking up and it's a pretty casual event, I'm at Element Games or wherever it might be, having a Warhammer World, then yeah, you're a lot more casual. There's less on the line, a lot more people who are not tournament hardened. So you read the room, and for me as well, it's always been about what's the impacts. So, like, if someone forgot to cast one spell and we're about to kick into the movement phase, or, okay, that's fine. When we're in the middle of combat or shooting and they've forgotten to do something, different story. So there's always, for me, it's always degrees, but we kind of getting too deep on that one. Maybe 2 final questions. I think I could talk to you, Tom, forever, mate. I think you and I could talk forever. I've got COVID. I'm surprised I'm holding up as well as I have. I'm doing very well. I'm partially dying. You talk chess clocks.
Okay.
Is this something? Is this something that you enjoy? Is this something that all tournaments should use? Should we use them at the top tables on day 2? Like, what's your feel? Because I think for most people, I've seen a lot of people weigh in on chess clocks, but most people haven't got experience with it. They just they have a thought.
Yeah. So I'll caveat this with my experience is completely different from anybody else's, because I haven't played with one. I've only coached. So as a coach, they were amazing. I could walk past, I could see the spread of time. If it was heavily one way, that's fine, because it's punishment if you run out of time. There was at no point did I have to go to a player and say, speed up or do this, that, and the other. At no point did an opposing coach or I have to go to the opposing team to say, your player's playing slow, because it's recorded. Somebody wanted to go to the toilet. It's on their time. It's fine, whatever. You're playing the France, the Wales games, arguably they're the rounds for the tournament. If you want to take 10 minutes to sit there and think about a specific thing, do it, but just know that you've got to make that time up somewhere else. I don't feel I can comment too much on them as a player, because other than a couple of practice games, I haven't used them. And I'll be honest, during the practice games, I forgot about it. Because we were playing practice games and I wasn't practicing the chess clock, I was practicing an army. Maybe after this weekend, chess clocks are in force at the Champions event, so I'll have a different opinion. I don't think so. I think I'll enjoy using them as a player as well. But I can only really speak as a non-player, and being able to walk past. There's some times where I had to nudge people and say, look, is what you're doing now supposed to be on your time or your opponent's? Because it was maybe their opponent's turn and the clock was ticking on them. But that's just people aren't used to them side of things. If we're talking local events or local events, I think no. Like, you don't discourage people from playing it. It seems counterproductive. Talking at big events becomes a different story, but I also don't think it's a top table only thing, because are you then saying your mid-table players' time's less important? No, it isn't. They may not be playing for the win. 40k does it in a way where I think if the chess clocks have to be there at the event, if one player wants to use one, they have to use one. And I think that's fair. It's maybe you're walking across the table. It could be any table, any round, and your opponent's put 60 pink horrors on the board. You're like, okay, I can envisage an issue. Please, can we use a chess clock? And I think that's fine at the bigger events. I think Worlds players have a slightly jaded view on the chess clocks being the rounds were 3.5 hours. That's not normal for a singles event. So you're under less pressure because the time you've got extra half an hour, even 45 minutes in some cases. Opinions might be different if that clock time goes down by 25 minutes a player. That's all of a sudden then it becomes a little bit more rushed. But also becomes maybe as important, maybe more important, because you've got less of a spread of time. I think if I was to brainstorm an idea now, using something like Wizards of the Coast as an example, we always love to look at Magic and other competitive hobbies as a drawing board. Wizards have different rules levels. So they have standard REL for Friday Night Magic and for local events. The moment you step up to GPs, PTQs, things like that, I haven't played Magic for ages, so they terms might be wrong now. But when you step up to that, it's competitive rules event level. So, can Warhammer draw from that? Can we have this tournament is a regular tournament? Whatever, no chess clocks, do whatever you want. This is anyone can play. Do we then have bigger events that then either enforce them or have that one player can mandate? Which new players, may be a little bit more put off, but also they're likely to be the bigger events. And actually, players who tend to go to the bigger events tend to have fun, regardless. Yeah. And if they are there not doing particularly well, what is the chances of said opponent on table 50 mandating a chess clock? But I think having them as an option is worthwhile. Again, talk to me again on Monday after playing with them. Might be different, but I don't think it would be.
No, I think, Darren mentioning as well in the chat that, everyone seemed to go 5 rounds, which is awesome. And I don't know if that is to do with the chess clocks because it was extended rounds for Worlds. But I think, for me at least, I'm interested in trying the chess clock. It wasn't available to me at the tournament that I was just at, but I have less than 10 games of Daughters of Cain under my belt. So I didn't want to add that extra pressure. But now that I've got some repetition and I've got over 10 games with the new book, I'm willing to try it. And even if I'm just watching my own time, just to speed up the process, because whether I'm running a horde army, like I'm always super nervous. And actually, you know what, at my own detriment, when I play my gits, and I do play them a lot, 160 idiots, I'm always playing super fast because I'm always concerned about my opponent and dragging the game down too slowly. But actually, that chess clock,
you might not be doing that anyway, but subconsciously you'll think it and your opponent will think it because you've got more models.
Yeah. But for me, like I'm going too fast.
Yeah, sometimes it actually just adds that leveler that the player with the more with more models isn't the slower player because you've got proof of it. But it's hard without the chess clock. If you're called a slow player using horrors or gits, you can't really defend it because it's more likely that you are, but you might not be.
Yeah. There's been plenty of time, but like if I look at the clock and go, right, well, I've still got plenty of time, I can chill out and slow down because I'm looking at the clock and I see how much time I've got and I'm not rushing. And I think that's always, at least I'm really nervous when I play my hordes because I don't want to be seen as taking too much time and then my opponent doesn't get enough time. So, I'm willing and open, and I'm glad to hear so many positive experiences from the World's people. I think overall people seem positive about it, and I wonder if it'll become more common, whether it's just an option for me, like, hey, I want a chess clock, or if it's something at the top tables, or round 4 and round 5, whatever it might be.
Sure. Yeah.
Last question, and maybe like this is like almost like your sales pitch, Tom. If someone's thinking about playing teams or maybe even playing Worlds, what would you say to them?
Apply is the main thing. So we are in a transitionary period at the moment as a team. We're hoping to have a new captain selected by Friday next week, so 25th, something like that. Applications close on Monday, and then we've got a voting period as a team where the outgoing players from the Six Nations and the Worlds team will vote the new captain in. So we've got some applications in at the moment, all look really good. From that point, me and the chosen captain will amend the charter. So we've got a charter written for how selection should work, but it needs updating to reflect Worlds instead of ETC, 8-man teams instead of 6. There's no point in me doing that. I may as well do that collaboratively with the new captain rather than dictating what they need to do. So team selection will start fairly soon. We've got Six Nations in November in Belfast. So selection for that will start fairly soon. Apply is all we can say. There'll be a selection committee as normal, chosen by the new captain or captains if we go multi-captaincy the same way we did this year. Players that don't get in will always get feedback from somebody within the committee about, why they didn't get in. Not to put them down, more of a go away and do this. So use Toby Meadows as an example. He applied the first year, didn't get selected, fairly new to the scene, had come from 40k, had made an impact, but was probably a little bit green, hadn't played team events and things like that. Got the feedback, went away, played some team events, won some events, got on some teams. He was offered to spare player for teams that needed him. That he didn't know the people. But he's like, look, I'll come and play. I want the experience. Goes away, applies again for Worlds, gets straight onto the team, does really well. So the system works, is the hope. So apply. If you don't get in straight away, don't be dejected. We've only got 14 spaces, and some of those spaces will be taken up twice by players who need to play Six Nations and Worlds. But we are in 16 spaces. We're 8 and 8 now, aren't we? Not 8 and 6. So we are in a growth mindset as a team. So we are always looking to bring new people on. It's not a closed shop. We've had 20 unique players over the last 4 events. So, majority of the team this year has done their first event. So, we're constantly looking to bring new people on. From a selection point of view, have done team events, have done well, used a variety of armies potentially. There's all those sort of things that will go towards somebody's selection. An actual application, there'll be something to fill in. Make sure you use that space to tell people why you should be selected. Not just, please see my TSN rankings page. I've won 28 games or something like that, because that's cool, but have they all been with the same army? Do we need you to use a different army? Is there any evidence there that you can play something else well?
So, and I appreciate that you are speaking on behalf of like all teams at this point in time, and I recognize that everyone has different selection criteria and what's important to them, and there's a lot of things, right? But if I was aspiring to play in a Worlds team, let's say it was England or any team, right? Like I see Cons just jumped in the chat talking about Greece. And I think that's a cool thing, right? There's going to be more and more teams coming next year, especially as COVID restrictions and challenges start getting, Canada missed out, unfortunately, Ukraine and Russia missed out. I'm hearing other teams are going to be getting involved. So it could be a really big World.
Yeah, in the Discord, we had Team Peru and Team Argentina from memory, and Singapore.
Yes, so I've heard Singapore.
These more long haul nations as well, they can make it over. If we get 30 teams next year, then
I wouldn't be surprised if it's 30 or more, because was it 22 or 24 this year?
21 in a UN this year. So yes,
you had all these people that wanted to come. Like Canada had to drop late. There was a couple of drops. Very likely could hit the 30. But what's more important to you? Is it that, I've come first at a bunch of large events? Is it flexibility? Is it that I can win with multiple events? And maybe I'm more of a 4-1 type player, but I do it with a couple of different armies throughout the year. Is it like, how do you even know about culture? Like, how do you know if I'm going to fit team harmony? Like, is it like the language that I use? Like what? I guess.
It's super hard. So, from a culture point of view, what I don't want is people that will come to me after a game and say I lost because of dice. That happens, but that's not why you lost in most cases. Toby, again, great example of this, lost a few games at Worlds, never once complained about dice, always managed to point me to the mistake he made and never made the mistake again. That's the sort of player that you want on the team. I'd rather have, as a captain, 4 people that have 4 and 1 10 events with different armies than a person who's 5 and 0 with the same army every time. In most cases, the difference is, where does that one game? If you're 4 and 1, are you losing the table 1 game every time? If you're losing the table 1 game every time, is there a mindset issue? Because Worlds is 6 of those. Worlds is 6 table 1 games with the country riding on your back and things like that. So you need to prove that you can win those games. You know, if you constantly hit table 1 and get knocked back down, there's something to push past potentially there before you go through to sort of a Worlds level event. In some cases, but again, sometimes the armies that you use might fit with a team strategy of, you know, you might go and be the orange matchup person, and things like that, you know. But generally I find when somebody wins one event, they win a few more. So once they push past that 4-1 boundary, it opens the floodgates a little bit, and then they become that player. But yeah, experience of matchups, team experience is huge as well. You know, if you've never done a team event, I wouldn't select you for Worlds. Simple as that. You may get selected for Six Nations as a proving ground under the proviso that you attend some other team events beforehand, because team events need that analytical level of knowledge. You know, you can't just play on intuition. I'm a huge intuitive player, so I don't often think that my predictions before games are as accurate as some more analytical players would be. But you need to get that in you. You need to know where your strengths are with stuff like that.
But that comes with over time, right? Like intuition and, you know, natural instinct kicks in because you've got repetition over time. You've got experience. You have thousands of games under your belt, whether you've watched, you've played, you've discussed, real life tabletop simulator. That all feeds into intuition. And it's interesting hearing how important the Six Nations, Brotherhood, other different team events are essentially your feeder system. Because,
Six Nations, in the old charter, when Worlds was 6 players and Six Nations was 8, we put a stipulation in that a player needs to have played a Six Nations before we can select them for Worlds. That's mainly just to create that funnel system, so that you're never sort of bypassing people and things. We had to break it a little bit because of COVID and various other things. And then when Worlds went to 8 players, in the charter I'd already written that when Worlds goes to 8, we'll heavily reconsider dropping that, because otherwise, if you start to lose Six Nations applicants, your pool gets smaller, and that's not what I want. The pool wants to be as big as possible in most cases. So yeah, team events as feeder ground. Seek out games and play with the people who you are better than you. And I don't mean that in a holier than thou sense, but the world's players. Play games against them. Get your name known, get your face known. Because although we'd never select on faces and names, it doesn't hurt. You know, go prove that you're a nice person. You know, don't rock up to a little practice weekday with a few people on the Worlds team and be a tool, because you know you might beat us, but are you doing it in the right way? You know, we'd never want to select somebody who's going to give us a bad reputation, because you know we've got sportsmanship awards to defend as well as winning the event. You know, so yeah, it's a bit of everything.
I think the other consideration we haven't talked about, and maybe it's because of the Australianism in me, is Australia, when it went from 6 to 8 players, we included a couple of mercenaries, Fabian, Peter, for example, and neither of them Australian. But what got them into the team, obviously, one, they're good players, unfortunately missed out on England selection. But the other one is with Tabletop Simulator, and, you know, people like there's Butcher's Buffet, there is the Owen Jackson tournaments. There's a whole bunch of different Tabletop Simulator events that you can get yourself known. You can get yourself to understand and meet virtually players that are, you know, very well practiced, could be on Worlds teams, and go hunt them out. So lots of ways.
Other teams is also a very good way to get. You know, you turn up for an application for a team, and they say, "Oh, what teams experience have you got?" Actually, I was there last year. You know, I played for this team. I sought them out. They needed a player, and I took that on and went and played. And these are the results. This is what I took from it. You know, that's golden.
Yeah. I hope through this almost 2 hours of discussion, and I could keep talking to you, Tom. I could talk to you till the cows come home.
I've got black coaches to base before I leave for Nottingham.
You've got a tournament literally soon. I'm dying of COVID. I've got General's Handbook things to record and edit. But this has been really insightful because, again, look, Worlds isn't always people's goal. And the challenge with Worlds is it's expensive. To take a week or 2 weeks off to travel halfway around the world in my situation, and that money could be a family holiday, it could be something like a new car, whatever it might be, is often a bridge too far for a lot of people. So even if Worlds isn't your goal, there's plenty of teams tournaments. I've named just a couple, and I'm sure there are maybe not hundreds, but there's a lot more teams tournaments that are available to you. And if you don't have one, no doubt you could start one. It's a simple 4-player tournament. It's a great format. I highly enjoyed playing in it. I will happily play again. I am considering applying for the Worlds for next year, so who knows how that'll work out. But it's a completely different experience from match play, and I think part of it is it's the competitiveness. The other part is going to be the spirit of competition and community that's involved. And ultimately, I think a little bit of the country pride as well. And I think there's a lot of fun in that.
Mm-hmm. I always say teams is match play plus. You're playing with the framework, but just so much added on. It's just layers and layers of complexity, but not in a bad way. Just everything that makes the game good is exaggerated with teams events.
Everything from singles is thrown out the window, and that's what I love about it. You throw out the whole structure you're so familiar with. Tom, if people wanted to find more about you or wanted to chat to you, I have your Twitter handle in the description.
Awesome.
I don't know if you're still private, but
no, I haven't been for a while. So my issue was working for myself. My name is the company name as well. So when you Google me, it brings up the Twitter feed. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know about it, but I'm like, just live with it at this point. As long as I don't start doing anything naughty on Twitter, I'll be fine.
Just lean into it. Like I remember when I worked at a tech company, we used to have tech companies will have a day off every month where you can do some cultural thing. I brought Warhammer in. I'd be sitting at my desk painting Warhammer.
Don't get me wrong. It's not a hidden part of my life in any way, shape or form. My business profile has it plastered all over it and things like that. It was more just that's my thoughts in 140 characters that could quite easily be misinterpreted. But I think I'm clean.
So your Twitter handle's below. Go follow Tom. Highly recommend. Great Twitter, and
I'm in
very knowledgeable.
Discord under Discord name is Magnitude, which is an old Warcraft thing. So I'm in there as well. Hit me up on Discord if you want to chat. If you pick my brains on Teams events, I'll talk about Team Warhammer all day, every day.
Any shout outs? Anyone you want to shout out, or any even trash talking for the TSN champions?
As an outgoing captain, again, just massive thanks to the teams and community selection committees, things like that, for making my job a lot easier and for helping me as well. I'm the captain, but in no way do I do this on my own. It's collaborative, and if everybody played their part every single time.
No, that's awesome. All right, Tom, I'm going to go and go get some hot drink and feel my throat. You are an absolute legend. Go follow Tom on Twitter. Go chat to him in the Discord. There's 5,000 people there in the Discord. Insane community. Love you all. Thank you so much. Hopefully I get to meet you next year
that'd be amazing.
If I'm in the World's team. Just going to
find over anyway
first. Well, if not, I want to come to, I'd love to come back to England. I'm waiting for an event to come out. Who knows? Maybe Bobo. I'm going to LVO. Maybe it's a Bobo or some big event. I did Blood and Glory a few years ago. Who knows?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt we'll see each other in person.
All right. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the chat. You know what to do. # like, comment, best ever. Tom is a legend. You've learned so much. I've learned so much. Tom, I'll let you go and paint those black coaches, and I will go and rest the voice. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.